but the diet industry does not negate science. Ding, 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 like a whole bunch of bells just went off. We have a logical explanation now. Hey everyone, welcome back to the channel. My name is Sam. If you are a returning viewer, welcome back. I love having you guys here every single week, and I hope you are down for the shenanigans today. If you are new here and this is the first time you are seeing my face, welcome. I make weekly videos dissecting internet nonsense, so if you're into that type of thing or you like today's video, I hope that you'll consider liking and subscribing. It really helps out the channel and it makes sure that you never miss another upload from me. Alright, I don't know about you guys. Maybe it's because we have local elections coming up, but something that I have been thinking quite a lot about lately is scientists and politicians, and not necessarily in the way you might think, right? I'm thinking a little bit about how sometimes they'll talk about not wanting to release full findings of something because they don't want to create hysteria, they don't want people to misinterpret, misunderstand, or worse, spread misinformation or disinformation, because, you know, the public is going to do what the public is going to do. And, well, they're the public. And we've seen examples of that online, right? Like this with Virgie Tovar.
To me, and she was like, if science isn't serving humanitarian ends, then what is the point that we're doing? Like, what's the point of it? You know? And it's like, right, because are we making science for aliens? For like some, I mean, like, what are we, you know what I'm saying? It's like, so if by our scientific notion of whatever health is right now, if that's excluding 68% of the population, which is like the plus size population, if that's excluding 70-ish% of the US population, then it's not working.
Yeah, that's not how science works. And Virgie's only one example, right, of the reason that I just mentioned why scientists, physicians, politicians, not that I'm defending any of them, right? I'm not. But I think that's sometimes why they're not the most forthcoming with their research. It's just too easy for people to take things out of context or take something that they don't understand because they don't know how to read a scientific document, and for them to twist it however they need to. And I know a lot of people are going to be like, I know exactly who you're talking about. Honestly, I don't think that you do, because this is who I'm talking about.
Is this an opportunity to talk about the obesity paradox? And yes, it is cold enough for me. The obesity paradox is the fun way the science and medical community maintain their bias against fat people. See, because instead of going back and being like, maybe weight isn't as impactful on people's health as we stated, they just call it a paradox. It's too confusing. This paradox states is actually a lot of people who carry extra weight on them fare better during medical emergencies. Like, you're more likely to survive a severe heart attack, cancer, illness, injury. Carrying extra energy stores on your body helps you during recovery. And instead of using this opportunity to stop stigmatizing larger bodies in medical fields, they just said, it's a paradox, we're confused. You can Google it if you don't believe me. This is highly researched. And there's more proof that BMI is trash.
Oh, I'm sorry. I don't think you realize that the Obesity Paradox has thousands of peer-reviewed articles on it and an entire fucking book.
Yeah, that's right. Today we are going to be talking about fat activists, fat liberation, the fat positivity movement, and the obesity paradox. Grab yourself a snack, little Alice, because we are diving into this rabbit hole together. Let's get into it. To be honest, outside of the two TikToks that I just showed you, I had never heard of the obesity paradox before. It was something that had been outside of my realm of information, of knowledge. So I was intrigued. I wanted to learn more based on finding this information. I specifically set myself some research questions because if I don't, I will fall into 20,000 rabbit holes. I don't know if that happens to anybody else, but then I will have been on the computer for 6 hours and accomplished absolutely nothing. So those questions that I set for myself included, what is the obesity paradox? And do fat people actually live longer than thin people, as was stated by Anti-Diet Pilot? Let's get started. So what is the obesity paradox? The obesity paradox was first discussed in 1999 by researchers looking into overweight and obese 1 patients undergoing hemodialysis treatments. It has since been found to exist in those with heart failure, myocardial infarction, acute coronary syndrome, chronic obstructive pulmonary disease, pulmonary embolism, and in older nursing home residents. According to the original research, they state the following: while obese people have twice the risk of developing heart failure compared to individuals with a normal BMI, once a person experiences heart failure, those with a higher BMI had lower mortality rates than those with a normal BMI. And I can already hear fat acceptance crying out.
There's literally no health issue that is exclusive to fat people. Nobody's saying that these health issues don't exist, but they are not exclusive to fat people.
They're not exclusive to fat people. She's not incorrect. But even the science you scream that you agree with just said you are twice as likely to come down with these diseases than a person who has a normal BMI. Science. Like, you will literally fight to the death with people online to scream the words that there are no diseases exclusive to fat people. And I don't know about you guys out there who are watching, anybody who watches this video, but I don't want to experience heart failure before experiencing the benefits of having fat on my body once I've had heart failure. It just doesn't sound pleasant. Like, that it's not something I would say I'm looking forward to, right? Like, one day my fat is going to save me because I'm going to have heart failure. Okay, so once I found this research about where the obesity paradox came from originally, I was so curious about the list of diseases that I just read that they included in their research, and I wanted to know how someone with a higher BMI, like, how would that higher BMI be beneficial to them once they had this disease happen, right? Or this medical thing. So, content warning here. I'm going to get into some of this. If you don't feel comfortable talking about death and or wasting diseases, please go ahead and skip to the timestamp on the screen. I will go ahead and try to post some timestamps in the description as well, so you can hopefully just click and skip right to that point in the video. But please do that. Please take care of yourself if you cannot handle topics like that today. So let's go ahead and use the very original research, which focused on patients undergoing hemodialysis. According to the Mayo Clinic's definition, hemodialysis is a treatment for advanced kidney failure that utilizes a machine to filter waste, salts, and fluid from the body's blood when a patient's kidneys can no longer function properly. So again, it's another pretty extreme medical ailment to go through before your fat somehow becomes beneficial to you, right? And we can see, I'm going to show the Mayo Clinic's page here. We can see that the Mayo Clinic proposes that patients who undergo hemodialysis make changes to their diet as part of their treatment. How fat-phobic of them. In all seriousness, though, the reason that they're recommending this, and they do say so on their website, is that it's now more important to that patient to be tracking the fluid, their salt intake, and those things to help their kidneys because they're already not functioning, right? So they need to keep themselves healthy between the hemodialysis treatment. They specifically note that patients should monitor fluid intake, protein intake, sodium, potassium, and phosphorus. Now, I want to take a moment and just point out that when you change your diet and you begin to monitor for things like micronutrients, right, to make sure you're getting your vitamins and minerals, it will typically result in weight loss, especially if you're eating a standard American diet. Like, I don't feel like that is information that's not widely known, right? Like, everybody knows that. If you start focusing on getting all your vitamins, vitamin A, C, K, all of the things you can get from food, you're more likely to stop eating junk food and start eating things that contain those nutrients. And we know from research found in other materials, such as Fearing the Black Body, a book that just will not die, that being grossly underweight is also bad for people. Like, it was found to be almost as dangerous as being overweight as far as resulting in early death, right? So a person with more fat on their body has more to burn before becoming underweight, increasing their risk of death. So ding, 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 like a whole bunch of bells just went off. We have a logical explanation now why an overweight or obese person would live longer dealing with one of these diseases than a person who is at a normal body weight or a lower body weight. To this, I just want to add that when I was looking into hemodialysis, I came across so many research articles stating that with this treatment comes a major clinical problem called muscle wasting. Muscle wasting is defined as unintentional weight loss where the muscles are being eaten away, decreasing the overall quality of life for a patient and increasing their mortality rates. So once again, someone who has more mass on their body has more mass to be stripped away before they become underweight and or perish from their body eating their own muscles, basically. And before we move on to discuss if fat people actually live longer, I just want to pause for one more second to reflect on the fact that for the obesity paradox to take place as it exists, as it's been described, for a fat individual to live longer than someone who is normal weight or underweight, they have to have suffered some sort of horrible, extreme medical emergency. And many of those emergencies, fat people could lower their risk of these emergencies by losing weight, right? And I'm not minimizing the fact that losing weight is difficult. And there is a diet industry that exists. I understand that, but the diet industry does not negate science that carrying excess weight on your body doubles your risk of these extreme medical maladies. It just doesn't. So I don't want us to forget that as we continue. Now, as I mentioned in the beginning of this video, sometimes scientists are very wary of what they are publishing and putting out into the universe. One scientist relating to this obesity paradox in 2010 said this: "This is potentially a dangerous message to promulgate from retrospective data in an environment saturated with an obesity epidemic and obesity-related conditions." He was talking specifically about the obesity paradox. You see, years before TikTok would even come to exist as we know it, this scientist knew that there were people out there who would take this research this snippet of retrospective data basically telling people if you're overweight and you have these risks, you're going to suffer this medical malady, but then you might survive longer than a thin person. He knew that someone would take this information and spread a message that they didn't understand. And he was not wrong. In 2010, he was not wrong. They could see the writing on the wall. Nobody knew that the internet was going to become what it was going to become, but it wasn't an unknown that people were going to take this and run with it, right? It's just, that's so crazy to me. And so now I want to talk about, do fat people actually live longer? There was a ton of good research out there about this. And so I just want to make sure that we don't forget to talk about it. There were two main points that just kept popping up over and over again. And so those are what I'm going to lean the most heavily into. But there are certainly more research and articles out there to be seen, to be read, if you're interested. First, I found so much research that pointed to the fact that many of the obese patients in the original study had comorbidities or other ailments for which they were more regularly seeing a doctor than their thinner counterparts. And because of this fact, they were being diagnosed much earlier than the folks who were not seeing a doctor regularly. And I don't know that that's a good thing to find or to promote, especially among the fat acceptance and fat liberation movement, because they're being diagnosed earlier, which means typically at a younger age, right? And so that also means that they are living more years with a disease. So they have even less disease-free years than someone who gets diagnosed later. Now, of course, being diagnosed earlier means that you might be able to catch it, to fix it. That's not what I'm saying. Please go to the doctor and do all of those things. I just want to make sure that nothing is being misinterpreted here. But because people had other comorbidities such as diabetes, heart complications, they were already going to the doctor. Where a thin person who was maybe more healthy and didn't think they needed to go to the doctor, it was getting caught much later in the process. So that was something that researchers noted. According to one source, people who were overweight actually had a similar longevity to those who had normal weights, but they lived a greater proportion of their shortened lives with the disease. And that's specific to the people who are overweight. Someone explained in another research article that when you're diagnosed at a young age, if you can manage the disease, of course, it's going to look on the surface like they lived longer, right? Because they lived longer with the disease. But when you think about it, it doesn't seem like much of a flex to tell people that you got diagnosed with heart disease at 30 instead of 60. There was not a single article, a single source of research that I could find. And I have started paying for some of the research databases so that I can break through some of those paywalls. There was no research that could prove that fat people live longer than thin people. And I mean, the truth is, fat people can live longer now the same way other people can live longer because modern medicine has extended our lives in ways that, I mean, we weren't ever really prepared for, right? Like, modern medicine is intense to me. Like, we can keep people alive much longer than they should even be kept alive. And what's funny is that modern medicine is keeping fat people alive longer, but they also hate modern medicine. So it's just something that I find so ironic. I don't want to ramble, so I'll leave that there. But anyway, we have procedures like drug therapies and bypass surgeries and angioplasties and stents. Like, there are so many things that doctors can do to help people live beyond these medical emergencies. And in decades past, we couldn't help people when we didn't have stents, when they didn't exist, right? And so fat people and people whose risk was higher of getting these diseases, they may not have lived through it the way they are now. And it's interesting to me to see so many people living so deeply in denial that the excess fat, which is an organ that they carry on their body, it increases their risk. But to see them continuously deny that and refuse to want to do anything about it, it just, it really is something that I just cannot understand. And again, for people to believe that despite the research, that somehow being obese is going to eventually save them from a wasting disease that they may or may not have gotten if they weren't at twice the risk, it's just insane to me. I guess that's the only way I could think to phrase it right now. Like, it's absolutely insane to me. But there are people on the internet who want to believe that, who want to live in this denial. And even worse, there are thin people on the internet, average-sized people on the internet, who are out there telling fat people who are fatter than them, that it's okay to be fat and they shouldn't be ashamed of it. And there are no diseases specific to fat people. And telling them that their fat won't hurt them, it won't take them to an early grave, calling themselves a scientist and letting them know that the obesity paradox exists and that it's a real thing, you guys, because there's one book about it. Just imagine writing an essay in college, right? And there's only one book that can be your source. Just one book. And you don't address any counterpoints or any counter research because this one book proves the one thing you want it to prove.
It's called confirmation bias.
You would get a big fat F in that class. But you found a way to promote yourself and to make money and to promote the things that you do by getting people angry and getting people who are vulnerable and fat and maybe trapped in a cycle of an eating disorder. You're getting them to follow you and believe you because you're saying you're a scientist and that you have all the facts. It's almost too much. And again, I don't know about you guys, but I don't want to get to heart disease when I'm 30 instead of 80. You know, like, I don't want to deal with these things in hopes that my fat body will save me. That just seems so counterintuitive and like such a horrible way to live. It's a lot. Anyway, that is all I have for you today. I don't want to ramble at you, but I am curious to hear your thoughts about the topic. I know a few other people have done videos about the obesity paradox. Each of us has taken a little bit of a different approach, so I'm curious, what did you know about it? Did it intrigue you when you first heard about it? Did you do any more research? Do you think fat people live longer than thin people, right? Like, what are the things that you got out of this video? You'll have to share them with me in the comment section below. Thank you all so much for being here with me again this week. I will see you in the next one. Bye.